Okay, I have my front cam cover here, and I'm dealing with these stupid little follower things that were rubbing on my timing belt. When I took it off, they had grooves in it, and the timing belt had grooves in it. And reading online, everybody seems to think these are supposed to actually hang a millimeter or two above the timing belt. But when I just tried putting it on, they sat firmly on. So I know you're not supposed to modify Ferrari, but I ground the backs down a little bit on these things so that they would fit closer up against the back of the cover here. So hopefully now when I put them on, they will actually not touch the damn timing belt. Okay, you probably have to use your imagination, but you can just barely see that damn follower thing in there, and there's about 1 millimeter to 1.5 millimeters worth of space between that and the belt. So hopefully that will stop it from rubbing. When you're putting the front cam cover on, don't make the mistake of putting in a bolt and tightening it down. Try and get each one in just barely on its threads, because you have to do a lot of wiggling around to get them all to catch. So if you tighten one down or tighten a couple down, I guarantee you'll have to back them off. And it took me a while of playing to get them all to bite and go in. If anybody's wondering how to do this with a 4-post lift, what I actually have is the rear end obviously jacked up, the engine's gone, and I made some little trolleys with wheels that sit under the jack points, and I've got a come along hooked to a line up at the front suspension, so when I crank the come along, the car actually slides back and hangs off the end of the ramp, so I can put the engine in. I do have many buckets of water up in the front trunk to try and keep it from flipping over. You probably can't see it, but Lamborghini poster. I also have a strap running from one of the posts down to a eye bolt in the wall, so the whole thing doesn't flip up. It worked fine pulling the engine out. We'll see how it goes putting the engine in. Okay, before I put my engine in, I've hooked up some fishing line to my ECU plugs here, so that I can hopefully fish them out. I have a scrap of wood as a needle to put through the bulkhead thing. I also have a piece of wire going from the front intake, under the intake plenum, to the back for pulling the throttle cable through. One final comment is, after I put everything back together again and I ran the engine, it ran beautifully, but after the engine warmed up pretty nicely, there was a very slow oil drip coming down from the center and over the crankshaft timing sensors that I traced back to the rubber seal around the end of the crankshaft. It was like one drip every 15 seconds, but it still bothered the hell out of me. So with much pain in the ass, I pulled out the seal and put a new one in. When I got the old seal out, I inspected it and I didn't see any cuts or abrasions or anything, so I'm not sure why it leaked. But for the new seal, I did a couple things. One is I wrapped the crankshaft in a thick plastic sheet, one layer, just to try and protect this inner rim. And I was very careful. Once you get it past the key, there's actually a lip that this thing has to fit over, and I used a very blunt, thin plastic stick. It was actually the tip of a ballpoint pen, the tip that fits into your pocket. I trimmed that off and I used that to ease the edge over the lip on the crankshaft so I didn't damage the lip. So I was very careful about that. The other thing I did was I put a thin stripe of gasket sealant around the outside edge when I mushed it into the front cover plate. And finally, what holds the inner edge in place is a spring, which is actually easy to pop out. And if you look at it closely, there's a tapered end to it. You can actually unscrew the spring. It's got a little tapered end here that screws into the other end of the spring. So I unscrewed it and with wire cutters trimmed a couple millimeters off the fat end, literally 2 or 3 millimeters. Then plugged the tapered end back into the end of the spring and screwed them together again. And then I popped it back on the new seal. And what that did was it actually pulled that inner edge in just a little bit more. So whether it was the judicious use of plastic and carefully getting it over the edge of the crankshaft, the sealer around the edge, or the slightly tightened spring, I don't know, but now it runs with not a drip of oil. So if any of that helps anybody else, I wish you well and a non-drippy seal. And if you're wondering after all that if the thing actually runs, yes it does.